Thanks to Trade Coffee for keeping LegalEagle in the air, because you would not want to see me before my first cup of joe, am I right? All right, let's watch Tiger King again.
Where's the film?
In my recording studio.
And they don't have copies of it or anything?
No.
You see what I'm saying, Jim?
Yeah, I hear you.
Don't record your lawyer. Do not record your lawyer without permission. I cannot emphasize that highly enough. Hey all you cats and kittens, I mean legal eagles. I told you, this one almost broke me, but you guys had a lot of unanswered questions. Just when I thought I was out, you pulled me back in. But I wanted to cover some of the other things that I left out in the original Real Lawyer Reacts to Tiger King, some of the other crimes committed, allegedly, in the documentary, and some of the other crimes that the characters definitely committed off screen. Look, if Joel McHale can squeeze out an 8th episode of Tiger King with an iPhone and AirPods in his ears the whole time, we can do a 2nd episode of Real Lawyer Reacts. So without further ado, let's dig in to Tiger King again, for some reason.
The last day that I saw Don, he told me that he was done, that he was divorcing her, that she was one of the worst people he'd ever met in his life, and she was very dangerous.
He indicated to me that he was going to tell Carole that he wanted a divorce. Never saw him again.
Okay, so right off the bat, probably the biggest question I got was, did I think that Carole Baskin committed murder? On this channel, I tend to avoid trying to make judgment calls like these when not all of the facts are known. Sometimes I will go out on a limb and I will give my opinion as to whether I think a crime was committed or whether a lawsuit is meritorious or not, but almost always that's in cases where most of the facts, if not all of the facts, are known. Like, for example, a copyright case where I can look at the allegedly infringing piece of art and the original piece of art, and I don't need to know more facts than that. And that's really all that's relevant in a copyright case, for example. But here, this is a one-sided documentary with an agenda. I don't know that anyone can really opine on this. I will say that in doing more research for this episode and the prior episode, there's a lot more information about Don's medical diagnosis, about his Alzheimer's and his bipolar disorder. There's a lot more in terms of the conservatorship cases between him and his former family. So there are a lot of facts out there that are not in the documentary that I think are probably relevant here, that I think paint things in a different light. And the documentary needs to have equal parties opposing each other for narrative purposes. You need to have a good guy and a bad guy, or a bad guy and another bad guy of relatively equal power. And that lends to the narrative. So I would say if you're interested in this, check out Carole Baskin's retort to the documentary. She puts out a lot of additional facts out there. It's on the Big Cat Rescue's website, and judge for yourself. But I don't think it's my place to opine on whether I think Carole Baskin killed her former husband. I will say, though, that between Joe and Carole Baskin, only one of those people is in federal prison with a potentially life sentence to serve out. So, you know, take that as you will, and you decide who deserves the benefit of the doubt there.
My producers are filming a reality show.
So they want to do a show related to your apartment there?
They actually got it filmed.
Do they?
Mm-hmm.
And how are you protecting that?
What do you mean?
Well, if they've got it filmed, what do they need you for?
He blew up so bad when I showed him that contract. He was like, "You don't own me." I said, "Joe, actually, I do right now. I do own this show. I do own it."
Where's the film?
In my recording studio.
And they don't have copies of it or anything?
No.
You see what I'm saying, Jim?
Yeah, I hear you.
Don't record your lawyer. Do not record your lawyer without permission. I cannot emphasize that highly enough. There's really no reason for Joe to have recorded this in the first place. Number one, if you record it and then you show it to somebody else, you are waiving the attorney-client privilege. You are removing the confidence of the discussion between you and your attorney, and therefore third parties can get access to the things that you discussed during that meeting. On top of that, without permission, if this is a one-party consent state, you might be violating their right to privacy. On top of that, you have evidence that is bad for both of you, because if indeed the lawyer is suggesting that you go out and commit a crime that might qualify as conspiracy to commit arson. Lawyers have an ethical obligation to inform law enforcement when they know that a crime is going to be committed. So that goes beyond the realm of attorney-client privilege in the first place. Now, obviously, we don't know exactly what's going on here. This footage, I think, is pretty chopped up. It's meant to imply that something nefarious is going on between Joe and his attorney, so we don't know exactly what was discussed. But the implication is that the lawyer is suggesting that he go out and commit arson. There's no attorney-client privilege is going to attach when you actively suggest to a client that they go out and commit a crime. There are very, very, very big problems here.
That building where the alligators were kept, as well as a studio that Joe had, it was clearly an arson. It was a set fire.
It had burned so hot, there was nothing left. I dropped to my knees and I cried.
Okay, just as I am not going to opine on whether I think Carole Baskin killed her former husband, I'm not going to opine on who I think committed the arson here. This is, I think, based on what is shown in the documentary, clearly an act of arson. It doesn't seem like there's any natural reason why this thing would catch fire. And there are people with definite motives as to why they might commit arson. What I will say, though, is that if one sets fire to their own property intentionally, that still qualifies as arson. So you can't just go around torching your own stuff, because obviously that can create negative externalities, and you might catch your neighbor's alligator enclosure on fire as well. So we don't want all of their stuff burning down too. So if you set fire to your own barn, that qualifies as arson. Don't do that.
So I'm Dr. Bhagavan Antal, B-H-A-G-A-V-A-N, Antal, A-N-T-L-E, Dr. Bhagavan Antal.
Okay, let's talk about Doc Antal. There are two really interesting things about Doc Antal. Number one is that everyone was curious about potential sexual harassment claims based on the sort of implied cult-like behavior at this institution.
If they wanted to get to the top really quickly, they should sleep with him.
In general, there are two kinds of sexual harassment. There's quid pro quo sexual harassment, and then there's hostile workplace environment. Quid pro quo is do something of a sexual nature for me, and you will either be rewarded or you'll be punished if you don't do this.
He controlled every aspect of our day, what we were allowed to do, what we were, definitely what we were allowed to eat as vegetarians, but also they were pushing me to get implants.
And then the hostile work environment is using the basis of sex to create some hostile work environment. And you can imagine that if you are pressuring women to have plastic surgery, that could certainly give rise to a hostile work environment and give rise to a sexual harassment claim. Now, the other really interesting thing about Doc Antal is that his compound in South Carolina was raided by the police in December of 2019. Now, Antal claims that the warrants had to do with tracing lions that ended up in his institution that came from a park of very ill repute, and that the police were just simply trying to track down information related to somebody else. The police are not saying why it is that they raided his park. As you can imagine, they are not likely to comment on an ongoing investigation. But it's sort of up to you as to whether you think that it's related to Doc Antal's own improper conduct regarding animals, or it's related to somebody else, or both. But again, we don't have all the facts here.
It doesn't show stalking, it doesn't show battery, it doesn't show anything. It shows a verbal argument, and that's not enough to get an injunction.
And so that's why you think it was denied?
That's why I know it was denied.
But obviously...
That was dead on arrival. What raises my eyebrows is she threatened to kill me.
And that's not enough to get it?
Nope. There's free speech. There's free speech. We don't restrain free speech in this country. We punish it after it's done.
Got a lot of questions about Dawn's attempt to get a restraining order, and the attorney's comments that it was just free speech. So we punish speech after the fact instead of getting restraining orders ahead of time, and that's it's very half right. It's maybe a quarter right. Now, first of all, in Florida, you can get a domestic restraining order, and it doesn't require an actual act of physical abuse. In Florida, a restraining order is generally known as an injunction for protection. It's a civil court order, but if you violate that order, that can lead to a criminal offense. It does not require violence. You can get it if there are there's a history of abuse, or there are real credible threats. And generally speaking, there's a thing under First Amendment law called a true threat, which is not protected by the First Amendment. So you can't go around making true threats to people and thinking that you're going to escape liability. So it is possible for Dawn to get a restraining order under these circumstances, but you can imagine where that is simply generalized threats, it would be difficult. Oh, and speaking of restraining orders, Dawn wasn't the only one who wanted to get a restraining order. Joe's ex-husband, John Finley, has a history of some criminal activity, including in 2014, he was arrested for domestic assault and battery when he reportedly attacked Joe, although he was never charged. And months later, in October of 2014, Finley filed for a protective order against Joe, but that protective order was also dismissed because he failed to meet his burden of proof. And in September of 2018, the mother of his young daughter filed for a petition for a protective order against John Finley himself. So a lot of protective orders going around, a lot of potential assault and battery. It's a really sad situation, unfortunately.
With Jeff Lowe coming in to help him, Joe believed that if he just convinced us that he had endless resources to keep the lawsuit going, we would suddenly fold our tent and go away, which of course we were not going to do.
My lawyers recommended that we just dissolve the Carole Wayne Interactive Zoo Company and let Jeff open one in his name so Carole would have to start the lawsuits all over again.
Jeff Lowe. What can be said about Jeff Lowe? I would have thought he dressed really cool in 1997. So initially when I saw this potential investment from Jeff Lowe into Joe's zoo, it sounded like another fraudulent transfer. We talked about in the prior episode about the fraudulent transfer between Joe and his mother, Shirley Shrevogel, which we know it was a fraudulent transfer because she admitted as much. He was trying to hide his assets by putting them in the name of somebody else, which, you know, don't do that. So if you want to hear all about that fraudulent transfer, check out Real Lawyer Reacts to Tiger King Part 1. I'll put a link in the description. But it sounded like Jeff Lowe was doing the exact same thing. He was taking title to the zoo and in an effort to prevent Carole Baskin from getting the assets of the zoo. It seems like he's done more than that, though. It sounds like he's made a material investment into the zoo itself. I don't have all the facts here, but it sounds like this may be more bona fide than the transfer to Joe's mother. So I don't think we can necessarily say Jeff Lowe committed a fraudulent transfer here. And given that he's actively running the zoo itself, he had to make some sort of investment. It's hard to do, but it's not impossible to invest in distressed assets like this without it being a fraudulent transfer.
He decided he wants to stay in Vegas and try and make money out there. He talked a sponsor into buying a bus, and they called it the Jungle Bus.
Like a party bus with animals.
Why?
They haul people from casino to casino and let them play with cubs while they're doing it.
We thought it would be a good idea, but we were wrong. That was a big mistake.
Yeah, so even if we give Jeff Lowe the benefit of the doubt with respect to the GW Zoo, I'm not sure we can give him the benefit of the doubt with respect to his Vegas business. According to court documents, Mr. Lowe faces open court cases in Las Vegas Municipal Court where he's accused of doing business without a license in 2017 and failing to obtain a license or permit for wild or farm animals. So I can't imagine why adding big cats to a shuttle service for drunk Vegas tourists wouldn't work out. Seems like a really, really bad investment. But a good investment would be to subscribe to this channel. In fact, I was checking my Google Analytics and only 30% of the people that watch this channel are subscribed to this channel. So please subscribe if you like this content. And if you click the notification bell, I'm in the comments for the first hour after I release a video. So you can ask me all of the rest of the crazy questions we have about Tiger King. My life. And it probably won't surprise you to learn that Jeff Lowe also has pleaded guilty to mail and wire fraud.
Seth, you identify as a man. Were you upset when they kept referring to you as she on the show?
I don't think it bothered me as much as it bothered everyone else. I didn't really pay it any mind.
Okay, let's talk about Saf. Apparently in the original documentary, the documentarians misgendered Saf. I was using female pronouns, and apparently that's not correct, so I apologize for that miscommunication. I guess that was cleared up in the 8th episode, which I hadn't seen by the time that I did the first episode of Real Lawyer Reacts. But regardless, Saf is a pretty tough cookie, given that, that they were able to get back to work after getting their arm ripped off.
Who would you trust first again, Joe Exotic or the tiger who bit your arm off?
The tiger.
Saf also has a bit of a checkered history, including being arrested at least 8 times by the Garvin County, Oklahoma Sheriff's Department, including charges for DUI, carrying weapons, obtaining goods with a false premise, and a failure to appear for warrants. So, yeah, tough cookie and a checkered history as well.
Well, Joe came to me one day, just out of the blue. He says, "You think Alan could kill somebody?" I said, "Is he capable of it?" I said, "Of course, who's not?"
I was like, "I'll cut her head off for you if you want." And he was all into that. I said, would you like me to bring it back? No, get rid of it in the swamp. I was like, okay, will do.
Frank Allen Glover seems like such a normal, nice guy. A lot of people had questions about his plea deal and his prior history. Allen Glover has been arrested at least 20 times, including DUI, domestic violence, possession of drugs, and assault and battery. Like, you name it, this guy has basically been accused of it. So, given this guy's past history, they were surprised that he was not charged in the same conspiracy to murder that the Joe Exotic was. And prosecutors and U.S. attorneys have a lot of leeway in terms of who they will charge and why. And cooperating with the government is a great way to get a reduction in your sentence, to get a reduction down to suspended probation, or sometimes not being even charged at all. Now, it's a weird interplay between the way that this works in the federal system, where there are sentencing guidelines that, try as you might, the prosecutors have less leeway in terms of being able to forgive people based on their cooperation with the government. Now, the way that they tend to get around that is that instead of saying you were charged with conspiracy to commit murder and we're only going to give you probation for that, that generally doesn't work under the sentencing guidelines. They simply only charge him with a lesser included crime, something that can be pled down to no jail time or some other suspended sentence. So I suspect that is what happened here, that they just simply didn't charge him with the same crime that Joe Exotic was charged with, and they went for the maximum penalty for Joe Exotic because he was the sort of mastermind and the one that they really wanted to take down based on the egregiousness of his behavior.
You forged my name 20 times on cash checks.
Just in that 12 months, while he was running for the governor of Oklahoma, we found, I think, $88,000 some in misappropriated spending.
You just do whatever the you want without even asking me, and it's wrong.
It might surprise you to learn that Joe's campaign for governor of Oklahoma was not on the up and up. Under Oklahoma law, you are not allowed to use corporate funds to fund an individual run for political office. So really, using the funds of the GW Zoo for his ill-fated campaign for governor is basically just embezzlement. In Oklahoma, corporations are prohibited from making contributions to candidates, PACs, and party committees, but they can make unlimited contributions to ballot measures. If Joe, in fact, did use any corporate funds of the GW Zoo for his own political campaign above limits, definitely a campaign finance violation. And speaking of Joe's run for governor of Oklahoma, let's talk about his campaign manager, Josh Dial.
I was Joe's campaign manager for about 1.5 years. It was the worst experience of my life. It was horrible, horrible, horrible.
Now, although Josh was the relative voice of reason throughout this show, he has a checkered past, including a 2017 felony assault and battery. The affidavit that was sworn out against him states that Dial cut, stabbed, or slashed, I presume his boyfriend, with a Japanese ninja sword, a katana. The victim had an 11-centimeter laceration, and the victim was sent to the hospital via emergency air evacuation. If only there had been a warning sign that seemingly normal Josh Dial might not be as well adjusted as we thought.
I'm a libertarian, so technically the feds.
All right, so let's tally up all the crimes. Starting with Joe, he was sentenced to 19 different counts. His sentence included 108 months for each of the 2 murder-for-hire counts, totaling 216 months. He got 12 months for each of the Endangered Species Act violations, and 14 months for the Lacey's Act violations, all to run concurrently. Now, regarding all of the other characters in Tiger King, there are just simply too many crimes to count, so I'm not even going to try. All right, let us never talk about Tiger King again, because I need a drink. No, I need something stronger than this. Like Trade Coffee. Trade is great because not only do they have a huge selection of your favorite coffees, but they have an awesome quiz to get matched the coffee recommendations based on your taste preferences. I don't actually drink coffee every day, but when I do, like when I have to force myself to get through 8 hours of legal insanity involving big cats and crazy people, I want my coffee to actually taste good. And with Trade, you can discover new coffees from the nation's top roasters. Trade matches you with your own personal selection of coffee and conveniently delivers it to you. And let's just say that you're watching 8 hours of Tiger King, hypothetically, and that drove you to start drinking at 10 o'clock in the morning. My life. Well, they could probably match a coffee for that as well. Now, the first 100 Legal Eagles will get 30% off their first bag when they sign up, and you get free shipping. Just click on the link in the description, take the quiz, choose your frequency, whether you want 1 bag or a subscription, and then rate your coffee so your suggestions get better over time. And you can even choose whole beans or your preferred grind. It's really the best coffee website out there. So to get 30% off of your first order, click on the link in the description or use the promo code LEGAL30 at checkout. Clicking on that link really helps out this channel. So, do you agree with my analysis of Tiger King? Leave your objections in the comments, and check out this playlist over here with all of my other Real Lawyer reactions, including my prior reaction to Tiger King of all the other things I didn't cover here today. So click on this link, and I'll see you in court.